afternoon. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all and explain why we are here today. We are here today on the occasion of the late Professor Achwal Memorial Oration. This is an annual event in memory of our dear Professor Achwal, who walked in the same corridors as here and taught us incredibly well and brought us to a level where we can face the world and rise to the levels that we are today. Professor Achwal was known for various things. One of his qualities was the timeliness and punctuality, and of course the depth of his language and keeping us up to date. I am very glad that the Textile Department of ICT has agreed to organize these things every year. I welcome you all for this and for the subsequent editions of this memorial lecture. Thank you.
Good evening. On the occasion of the 6th Dr. Professor Achwal Oration, I'm Abhijit Achwal, his son, speaking here. It gives me immense joy and happiness and thanks to ICT for organizing this brilliant oration series, which has been happening on an annual basis. They've been kind enough to invite renowned technologists and professionals related from the textiles and allied fields, and it has ensured that this oration continues to get a pride of place and gets wide recognition, and different speakers come and express their views about the latest happenings, developments in the field of textiles and similar related subjects. So here's wishing ICT a glorious future and looking forward to many years of the Professor Achwal Oration series. Thank you.
Coming to UDCT is always a pleasure, more so to my own department, Textile. I can carry a lot of fresh memories of late Professor Achwal, who taught us fiber science, and when I think of my own days at UDCT, whatever I am today is all because of my professors, and Professor Achwal has played a very pivotal role in shaping my career. When Ullas texted me this message about today's oration, I said that there could not have been a better person than you. And when he said, "Are you coming?" Yes, said that I have not missed a single lecture of Professor late Achwal. So my humble tributes to Professor Achwal, and wherever he is, he must be smiling at all of us. Thank you.
I'm Naresh Bhatt, 1985 pass out from UDCT at that time, now it is ICT. I joined in 82 for textiles. It was a 3 years course. Why I remember Professor Dr. W.B. Achwal is, for the first time in our life or in India, I think because he had a German background, the lecture which he had given on eco-friendly, nowadays it is very much in vogue, but for the first time, eco-friendly processing to me in my life was introduced by Professor Achwal. So from that time onwards, it was a step-by-step journey in the textile industry. I passed out in 85, and then we built up from there. It was a very intense lectures of Professor Achwal that even today it is very much resounding, that it may be the fibers, it may be the dyeing theory, it is the theory of dyeing that we still remember many of them, although we may not be experts in that like himself, but still we are very much indebted to him for whatever we are today in the industry. Industry respects us for our knowledge, but the seeding of that, whatever wisdom we have gathered now, was done by people like Professor Achwal. Today, it is really pleasurable to come to our alma mater and meet the family members of Professor Achwal. It is really a very happening day for us, and even this day will be remembered by us for long. Thank you.
A warm welcome to you all on behalf of our department. I am Srishti Tiwari and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of Department of Textiles, Department of Fibers and Textile Processing Technology to the 7th Professor W.B. Achwal Endowment Oration for the year 2023 ICT Mumbai. Om Asato Ma Sadgamay, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamay, Mrityor Ma Amritangamay. I invite our honorable dignitaries to kindly come upon the dais for lighting of the lamp and request our HOD Professor Ravindra Kale to escort them. Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor A.B. Pandit, daughter and son of Professor Achwal, Dr. Deepti Devbakar and Mr. Abhijit Achwal. Speaker for the day, Shri Ulhas Nimkar. Asato ma sadgamay, tamso ma jyotirgamay, mrityor ma amritangamay. Thank you, sir and ma'am. I request all the dignitaries to kindly take their seats on the dais. We will now have our Vidyapeeth Geet Shri Rasayan Devi ke. I now request our Vice Chancellor, Professor A.B. Pandit, to express our heartily welcome to the speaker, Shri Ullas Nimkar, with a fragrant basil sapling. Thank you, sir. I would request Professor R.V. Adeverekar to welcome Dr. Deepti Debgaonkar with a fragrant sapling. Thank you, sir. I would request Professor A.R. Atle to please welcome Mr. Abhijit Achwal with a sapling. Thank you, sir. I would request Dr. Kedar Kulkarni to welcome Professor A.B. Pandit with a sapling. Thank you, sir. I would request Dr. Santosh Biranje to welcome Professor R.R. Deshmukh with a sapling. Thank you, sir. I would request Dr. Saptarshi Maiti to welcome the HOD, Professor R.D. Kale, with a sapling. Thank you, sir. I would like to invite Professor R.D. Kale to talk about the Professor W.B. Achwal Endowment Oration.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor A.B. Pandit, today's speaker, Mr. Ullas Nimkar, Chairman, Nimkar Tech Technical Services Private Limited, Registrar Professor R.R. Deshmukh, family members of Professor Achwal, and all the participants present in the auditorium, very warm welcome to all of you. I welcome you for the 7th late Professor W.B. Achwal Oration Endowment Lecture. Professor W.B. Achwal earned his BSc Tech in Textile Chemistry in 1953 from UDCT and was a first rank holder. He earned his first PhD in UDCT Mumbai University in 1957 and his second PhD in West Germany in 1960 under a DAD fellowship, and returned to India and joined UDCT as a faculty member. He was Professor of Fiber Science and also head of the Textile Division. He retired in 1990 and continued to be active as a consultant. Professor Achwal was a scholar and a teacher. He had devoted his whole life to the teaching and well-being of the textile department. He used to teach both to UG as well as PG in ICT, other institutions in India and abroad as well. He guided more than 20 PhD students and about 60 master's students. He published more than 120 research papers in national and international journals. His research in areas such as cellulose modification, solvents for cellulose, physicochemical studies in processing, staining techniques, and many other aspects of fiber science has been immensely useful to industries in India and abroad, especially in Germany and Russia. He had been a consultant to many industries within India and Germany. He visited Germany more than 10 times under different study programs and fellowships. He had a good command over German as well as Russian languages. His excellence in the field of textile chemistry was recognized nationally and internationally as he successfully completed projects for Sweden and German governments. He was a member of expert committee appointed by Ministry of Textile to recommend measures to tackle ban on azo dyes and expert evaluator for several eco-audits. Apart from technical studies, Professor Achwal took keen interest in Marathi literature, drama, music and sports. He was a member of committee to prepare chemistry dictionary in Marathi. He was also involved in the preparation of Encyclopedia of Textile Industry in Marathi. Professor Achwal had received the prestigious UDCT Distinguished Alumni Award from his alma mater and Hariom Ashram Award in 1987. To commemorate him, his children donated rupees 20 lakhs, and that is how this endowment came into existence. So again, I welcome all of you for today's lecture. Now I request Dr. Deepti Debgaonkar, daughter of Professor Achwal, to share fond memories about her father. Thank you.
Good evening, good afternoon. Uh, Professor Pandit, Vice Chancellor, uh, Shri Nimkar, dignitaries on the dais, off the dais, students and friends. Today we are here on this occasion of Professor W.B. Achwal Oration, and on behalf of the Achwal family, we would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to the director, Professor Pandit, the Textile Department, and the staff of ICT for giving us this opportunity by hosting this oration. So as it was mentioned, my father completed his graduation, post-graduation and doctoral studies at UDCT, ICT now, and he developed very strong bonds and friendship during his time he spent here, the student days, and also as a faculty. And many of these bonds stayed with him for his entire life. They were very close bonds which he developed here. By nature, he was very diligent and bright and was known as Pandit to his close friends and family. He went to Germany for his research work, and he was amongst one of the earliest scholars to receive the DARD fellowship. He completed some work there, and it was nice that he was able to earn his second PhD in Germany, in Aachen. Upon his return to India, as it was mentioned, he worked for 30 years in ICT from 1960 to 90. For him, his alma mater, UDCT, now ICT, was his second home. He had close friendship with doyens in textile industry, as well as his research and innovative contributions in dyes, natural dyes, fiber science, and he also developed many eco-friendly processes, techniques, and approaches. He continued to be a consultant almost throughout his life, a long time after his retirement. While growing up as children, we have seen his special affection for his students. Professor Achwal was a sportsman and loved hiking. Actually, he was responsible for developing Giri Vihar, one hiking institution, and many other things. He loved mountaineering. His mornings began by playing tennis, and he loved to play badminton, cricket, bridge, chess, etc. Some of his colleagues and friends may remember. During his tenure at ICT, he had many offers to lead other centers, institutes, and even industry places. But somehow he used to love his teaching and research and his students so much that he never left UDCT but continued to be here all through. As a person, he was very strict, but very affectionate. As it was mentioned, he visited Germany many times and had lots of friends there, close associates. And he visited Tashkent and Moscow on UNESCO fellowship. He enjoyed his research there, but also learned Russian fluently. He used to speak it fluently. He was a connoisseur of music, art, Marathi literature, and he inculcated the spirit of curiosity, questioning attitude, punctuality, forthrightness, commitment, and passion. He led by example. He advised the Indian government on jute policy and on natural dyes and on many eco-friendly processes in the Indian and international scenario. My brother Abhijit Achwal, my sister Swati Achwal, who could not be here today, she is in the USA. She could not attend, and the entire Achwal family joins me today in expressing our gratitude, our heartfelt gratitude. And we are indeed thankful to the staff, Professor Pandit and ICT, as I had mentioned. And I would like to specifically mention Mr. Ullas Nimkar, who is a speaker today, and he had close personal ties with the family and my father particularly. So my father also wrote several articles on textiles, even after his retirement in Coleridge and many other places. And he also was a recipient of, SDC, Society of Dyers and Coleridge Gold Medal. I think there are many things to share, but I will take your leave. And we look forward to Dr. Pandit and Dr. Nimkar's talk.
Thank you, ma'am. We are joined by Mrs. Roop Rashi, Textile Commissioner. I would welcome her, and I would request our VC, Professor A.B. Pandit, to please welcome her with a fragrant basil sapling. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. I would like to invite Professor A.B. Pandit to please deliver the welcome address.
Today's speaker, Shri Ullas Nimkar, Achwal sir's family, Dipti, Dilip, Abhijit, Professor Deshmukh, Dr. Professor Kale, I haven't missed any, except those in the audience, Professor Khole, ex-Vice Chancellor, Mumbai University, Mrs. Roop Rashi, and I can see many familiar faces which are regulars. Now it's very nice to be here, and these lectures in the name of past faculty of ICT is a periodic reminder of the fact that we are all standing on the shoulders of giants. You take every department, and since textile and chemical engineering were the two departments which were the starting department of ICT or UDCT at that time, the association of these two departments are even more. One thing Dipti did not talk about is the association of Professor Achwal and Professor Chiute in bridge clubs. It was a legendary stories, especially on Friday evening or Saturdays. Either it used to be in Professor Achwal's room or Professor Chiute's room, which subsequently I occupied. So I could still see that vibrations, feel those vibrations, because I myself was a very keen bridge player, hardly get any time, but I had tremendous respect for everyone or anyone who was passionate about bridge. So that was one thing which I cherish and like about Professor Achwal. Anyway, the point which I was trying to make is these should keep us telling that what are the typical heights which every ICT student faculty can reach and be recognized in the world. And for that to happen, you can't say that, well, at that time nothing was developed, as a result of which whatever people did got recognized. That is not the case. In fact, it has become more easier with the kind of access of knowledge which you have to identify where the innovation is required, how this innovation is to be carried out, and the things which you can learn from these giants on whose shoulders we are standing is their commitment, their passion for whatever they decide to do. And that is what taken them to the level at which they are today and they are recognized. So students of ICT, this is a golden opportunity for you to learn not only from the ICT's past faculty in whose honor such lectures are organized, but also the younger lecturers. You will find that the age of lecturers who are identified is also reducing, and it is expected as well, because that brings in the latest knowledge and the latest flavor which the students are expected to identify, work upon. So on behalf of ICT and my own behalf, I welcome you all for this event, and I equally look forward to listening to Ullas's lecture today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would like to request Professor A.R. Atle to introduce our speaker for the evening, Shri Ullas Nimkar.
Namaste, good evening, and welcome to dignitaries on the dais and the personalities in the audience. Welcome to this Professor Achwal, our Guru, is Endowment Oration. And the speaker today is Shri Ullas Nimkar ji, and I doubt anyone in this audience needs to be introduced. Even our UG students, the first and second year UG students, know him because they look forward to the receiving the coveted Nimkar fellowship. सो एवरीबडी नोज, जैसे बॉलीवुड में अमिताभ बच्चन या क्रिकेट में सचिन तेंदुलकर, वैसे टेक्सटाइल में उल्लास निमकर जी is a very famous and well known name. But anyway, I will just give a brief introduction about Ullas Nimkar ji. He is the chairman of the Nimkar Technical Services, and he is also president of the Society of Dyers and Colorists UK. He is the only second Bharatiya to be the president of the SDC UK. The first one is Dr. Sanjeev Kamath, ICTN, and disciple of our Guru Professor Achwal. So he is the second recipient, and he is on the board of many organizations, and he is a member of many councils. So, and he has won so many awards and fellowships. It's a long list, and I'm not going to go through each and every award and fellowship which he has received, but I have just highlighted two things. And he is a specialist in chemical management system and sustainability. And he has received, of course, the long list. I am not going to. And another very interesting thing which I have to mention about him is that he represents the 3 generations of Nimkars. His father, Dr. M.V. Nimkar, he founded ICTN. He found UDCTN. So he founded the Texan Lab, and Ullas Nimkar ji made it an organization of global repute. Then Ullas ji founded Nimkar Tech, and now his daughter Anaga, UDCTN, ICTN, she is taking it to a great height. So 3 generations of Nimkars associated with ICT and serving industry. And textile industry, as we all know, is considered as the mother of industrialization. So industry 1.0, that era in 1784 when the first mechanized loom or weaving loom started. So that is considered as the beginning of the industrialization. And the global population of that time was around 100 crore. So after almost about 200 odd years, now the global population is about 800 crores. And the per capita consumption is now considered as around 11 kg per person per year. So we can imagine what is the challenge. And this is the topic of today. 8 billion people, the challenges and to profit and business. And Ullas Nimkar ji is going to talk about it. And we have a person who has Triveni Sangam, a pleasant personality, which we all see. Then in-depth knowledge about this subject. And the third most important thing is an excellent orator, which you probably all know and will see now. So this is the Triveni Sangam. And as Sant Jnaneshwar एक दृष्टांत में कहा है कि क्या ना चलिए the drishtanta is चंद्रकांतु द्रवता कीर होए परिते हातोटी चंद्राची किया है तैसा वक्ता तो वक्ता नो है श्रोते वीणा. So we have an excellent orator, but without this receptive audience क्या हो सकता है. हाँ, so सोने पे सुहागा. And the topic is close to our heart, that is clothing. So let us welcome Ullas Nimkar ji.
Thank you, sir. I would request our speaker, Shri Ullas Nimkar, to take over the dais for the lecture and request the dignitaries on the dais to occupy seats in the row of the auditorium.
Honorable respected Textile Commissioner Dhruv Prashiji, Vice Chancellor of ICT Professor Aniruddha Pandit, Registrar Professor Deshmukh, Textile Faculty Professor Kare, Professor Atle, Professor Adivrekar, all the other dignitaries in the audience, and my dear friends. I think this was such a fantastic introduction, Professor Atle. I am honored. I would like to just add one point that you missed, perhaps this may add, is that this gentleman, Professor Venkatraman, and my grandfather were contemporaries in Manchester in 1923 as well. So it's 4 generations. And so the legacy continues. I have to thank Professor Achwal's family, all the family members whom I have known for many, many years. I have to thank Vijay Habbu as the lead organizer for proposing my name and for the committee for accepting this thing. For me, it is indeed a great honor to be a presenter for the Professor Achwal Oration. And today's my initiative is a small tribute to this great man. I have titled it Clothing 8 Billion Challenges to People, Planet and Profits. This was the original title. While I was writing, I added for posterity. And that is most important. So let me begin with these two lines which all of us probably know from Robert Frost's poem. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that made all the difference. And the reason I took this particular road was none other than Professor Achwal. So it may be perfectly right to say that what I am today, who I am today, is entirely the credit goes for giving the right direction, and that credit goes to Professor Achwal. Indeed, a legend from Aachen. My relation with Professor Achwal was very unique. It started in my school days, where I knew him as a contemporary of my father. Later on, when I married his friend's daughter, the relationship became almost, we called him Achwal Kaka. And thereafter, in my later years, after the 90s, he was an advisor to my company, then Textile Lab. And of course, rest is history. He pointed me the direction where I am today, and that's the way it went. My first memories go back from 90 to 95. These 5 years, this was after he retired. We did a lot of work, and he was advising us on the hazardous chemicals. And he worked in a big way with the Swedish chemical agency, which is called Kemi. This is based in Stockholm. And way back in 1996, the first chemicals in textile report was published by Kemi. And what is very interesting is in the first page, in the foreword, you will see Professor Achwal's name very clearly written. It's the Swedish Trade Council in Hong Kong and W.B. Achwal, an Indian consultant. That's where the line goes. It's in the first page. And he was amongst the first people to think about a subject like this. And I recall in the early 1991-92, he said that you need to set up a laboratory which has the capability of analyzing all this. And of course, for 2-3 months, 6 months, I dilly-dallied because it was a huge expense. So I didn't really take it forward. Then until one day he came and he said, look, if you don't like this idea, I'm going to tell somebody else. I said, no, I'm doing it. And that's when I put my foot and we just started off. We all remember fiber stain ACH. You mentioned staining agent. I only hope somebody has this wonderful formula because this was better than the then available Shirley stain from England, which was for identification of fibers. I don't know if anyone has this formula because it was a secret that he always made and got it for us in the lab. Later on, I had the chance of spending 1 week with him in Berlin. The years were 1998, from 4th of May to 15th of May. And we were from 10 different countries. And this whole week was on discussing environmentally oriented textile industry. This was organized by the Karl Duisberg Gesellschaft, that is the CDG in Germany. And those were fantastic days. One memorable thing from this week was that was the day we were halfway through the program when the Pokhran blast was initiated. And the rest of the 9 countries, they suddenly next morning were, we had great respect for India. It was something that stayed in my memory. I want to start this presentation with a disclaimer. You see, the content, views and thoughts in this presentation are accurate to the best of my knowledge. This subject is truly dynamic and you need to check for latest updates. All images I have taken from the net are purely for educational purposes only. With this, I have divided into 5 parts. I'm going to talk about these 5 parts, but on each of these slides on the left, you will see a beautiful photograph from the city of Aachen, where Professor Achwal spent his 2nd doctorate. He did it over there. Let's start with these 2 books. Some of you may have read, but Sapien is a complete history of mankind. How man, right from being an almost like an animal, from a hunter-gatherer and a forager to modern man. And Bill Bryson has almost spoken about right from the Big Bang to modern technology and science. But if we look at this, all this has happened in a very short time. The Big Bang is supposed to be 4,500 million years or more, but humans have been around, sapiens have been around for only 1.8 million years, a very short time. And that is also pretty big, 18 lakhs. But our life as we know today is perhaps better than it ever existed in these 1.8 million years. Absolutely fantastic. We don't have to struggle anymore. We have enough of food, we have enough of shelter, clothing, everything. These were two most glorious centuries. And why were they glorious? Because of our invention of distilling coal tar and getting petrochemicals. And everything that we made, right from pharmaceuticals, pesticides, polymers, dyestuffs, chemicals, fibers, everything comes from one single origin. And this coincides with Sir William Henry Perkins' invention of the first synthetic dyestuff in 1856. That was the time when everything just grew. Population from 1 billion to 200, in 200 years to 8 billion, which we just crossed about a few months ago. The modern comforts are absolutely phenomenal. I mean, we are experiencing modern comforts today like never ever before. This can be correlated with the chemical production. If you see in 1930, that's somewhere between the two wars, between World War I and World War II, chemical production was only 1 million tons. By the end of the century, that is in the year 2000, it had already touched 400 million tons. 2020, that's 3 years ago, it crossed 1,000 million tons. And the United Nations prediction is that by 2030, end of this decade, we will have crossed 2,000 million tons. Now that's a lot of chemistry. And that's what gives us all the wonderful products that we use in our lives. Our lives wouldn't have been the same without chemistry. If we come to clothing, for years together we use natural fibers from either animal or plant origin and so on, of course, until we come to less than 100 years ago when we had the first synthetic fibers, starting with nylon, then going on to polyester. Today, that's how our life is. If we look at the olden days, this person was sustainable because, this person wore this dress till it almost was in tatters and it was truly sustainable. Till we come to a time wherein we come to very modern clothing, wherein, well, this is style and this is excellent. The circle has come again, and as I say, this fashion is cyclical and customer is king. You give the king what he wants, they want this clothes again. So the only difference is that in the early days, they used to try hard. They didn't have to try hard to really get it into the distressed look. But today we use the most modern technology. I remember even in my college days, we used to hang our denim jeans and tie it to the motorcycle behind so that, they would fray and shred. That was our way of making distressed jeans. But now you have got modern technology using the most advanced lasers to produce something that looks really ancient, antique, and distressed and torn. Well, customer is king. That's what he wants. Clothing, we have ample now. We didn't have so many clothes even in our childhood. Maybe we had a few shirts, but today it's affordable, it's cheap, it's trendy, it's fashionable, and all this is possible because of what we call as fast fashion. And fast fashion, if you see down below, has got 4 elements. It's quick, it's cheap, it's mass-produced, and it's trendy. If we look at the transition of how textile industry moved over the years, it started in Britain in the 18th century, but soon after the wars, it moved to Japan. Thereafter, in the 70s and 80s, to Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Republic of Korea. Thereafter, in the 80s and 90s, to mainland China, India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. The next is right across the world. This is where industry is flourishing today. On the eastern side, you have got Vietnam, you've got Myanmar, Cambodia. In the African continent, we have got Kenya, Madagascar, Ethiopia, and many others. In the Central Americas and South Americas, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, and many other Latin American countries. This is where the production is moved. There is a trend that now production is coming closer to where the end is because have less of transport. If we see the middle class, if we see the wealth generated by the world, the first one is from 0 to 2000. You can see almost it's literally in the last small, short span. And if we see the next one in the last 200 years, right, you can see an exponential growth in wealth, exponential growth in GDP of each country. Everybody moved from being up from the poverty line into the middle class. Of course, as I said, this is the best 200 years. But along with something that's fantastic, sometimes you also have learnings. The first learning was that the rate at which we are consuming our natural resources today, we need 1.7 planet Earths. And what is given there as an Earth Overshoot Day is 28th of July in the year 2022, which means by 28th of July last year, we had already consumed our annual quota of natural resources. This date is coming forward. It is coming closer and closer each passing year. Fast fashion, partly to blame. Let's actually read this line. Fast fashion is all about design, quick design, production, and marketing strategy that focuses on creating large quantities of clothing in a very short period of time. By using trend replication, low quality materials, fast fashion provides low cost, trendy garments to the final customer. I can myself think back that, years ago in the year 2000, you could get a men's shirt for £5 in England. Even today you can get at more or less the same price. So it hasn't kept up with inflation. That means things have become tighter. The industry is squeezed. So what are the problems with this fast fashion? We have high carbon emissions, poor labor conditions, water consumption is excess, land use, water pollution, and the resources are wasted. So this is unfortunately the reality of fast fashion. Climate change impact we have from fiber production, clothing production, use from the consumer point of view, and finally after use. So the current process really puts pressure on all these. We have generated waste like never before. Clothing, electronic, you can look all around, medical waste, sludge and slurries, all kinds of waste, and it is now growing at a pace wherein it really needs to be addressed very quickly. At one point of time, about 5 years ago, this brand was caught burning their clothes because Burberry is an expensive brand. It's an aspirational brand. They don't want to sell their clothes at a discount, not at a sale. So they would rather burn it. And there were many, many Italian brands who did this as a standard practice. They would burn the excess clothing, but they would not sell it at a discount. Similarly, I'm told happened with expensive Swiss watches. They wouldn't sell at a discount, but if nobody bought it, they would just crush it in grinders, and many such things. Now this has come to a stop because the way it was publicized, but we have to do something because with 8 billion people, and I had an average of 8 kilos, but Professor Achwal just mentioned 11 kilos, so it just grows up exponentially. What do we do with all those clothes? Where do they go? If we see today, less than 1% is recycled. About 73% is either incinerated or it goes to landfill. Our current model is a linear model. We need to move to a circular model. That is very clear. But while we move to a circular model, we have to be careful. This is a study which actually we have done in our own laboratory. In this case, the polyester yarn was recycled from ocean plastic. And the workers, while handling on the knitting machine, developed an allergic reaction. Now here, there were some unknown chemicals that were carried forward into the recycled yarn. This is what we call as legacy chemicals today. We don't know, there were some sensitizing chemicals that came forward, but this is what was observed. Another observation that we had, we analyzed commodity chemicals that are being supplied to the textile industry. And our observation was that majority of the chemicals were not virgin chemicals, but they were recycled from other industries. So we found impurities like phthalates and alkyl phenol ethoxylates and many of the other impurities in even our commodity chemicals. This is something that as textile people here, I want to really convey this message because I don't have the answer. When we have done textile processing all these years, let us assume that we have 10 or 15 or 20% of wastage of chemicals. These chemicals that have gone into the effluent have been treated, have been made into a sludge, and then they have been very carefully preserved in secure landfills. But that's about 10 or 15%. My thought and worry comes from what happens to the remaining 80% of chemicals which are in clothing, which go to unsecure landfills, they go to municipal waste, and how they will break down, nobody knows, because it would be all kinds of degradations. It could be thermal, it could be photochemical, it could be UV, aerobic, anaerobic. and we don't know how it will break down. But eventually, at some point in time, these chemicals are going to enter the same water bodies that would have otherwise. I don't know why this issue has not been addressed so far globally. This is something that I just mentioned to you, so I won't repeat this, but we don't know whether the broken metabolites will be of a persistent nature. Now, in the textile supply chain, here we have a book written by the author is sitting in the room, right? And we use about 8,000 plus chemicals in the textile, leather, and footwear supply chain for various functional properties that we want to impart to fabrics and to leather. All these, many of these now are already, they have found over the years of the last 100 years to have impacts because of on health and the environment. So if we look at the health impacts, we have severe allergies with many dispersed dyes. Certain raw materials are cancer causing, mutagenic, they're endocrine disruptors. This is a new category which is really increasing very rapidly, leading to reproductive disorders and of course drop in fertility. On the other hand, on the environment side, we have land, air, water pollution, biodiversity discussions, acid rain, aquatic toxicity, global warming, these climate change, all these are issues which are being discussed today. I want to dwell a little bit on what is this category called endocrine disruption. And when chemicals started in the early days, always the toxicity was measured where death was the end point. So if we took mice and 50% died, it was LD50. If we took fish, it was LC50. And if we took Daphnia, but every time it was death was the end point. Later they realized that there were many chemicals which entered the human body and at very low dosage levels, where it did not cause anything like death, but they would cause endocrine disruption. So as an example, at Manchester, when they were discharging alkyl phenol ethoxylates in the river as surfactants, many male fish started producing eggs. So if you look up feminization of fish, you will find out that many of these, because the broken fragment actually mimics the female hormone estradiol. And these are a new challenge completely. Apart from that, our specific target organ toxicity, sensitization, all these became apparent over the years. The thalidomide tragedy from the 60s is something which is most shocking, that even in the pharmaceutical line, this drug was administered to women for ease of delivery, and children were born, as in the photograph that you can see. All over the world this happened. And so, we did not do enough study before even the pharmaceutical products were released. Now, here there are 3 specific cases in endocrine disruptors. First is on top you can see bisphenol A. Bisphenol A is something that we have had a huge problem. There were about 40 consignments of baby socks that have been lying in the customs in 2021 in California. They were not allowed to be imported over there. They were still lying in the customs. We don't know where bisphenol A came from. These were polyester socks with some elastomeric yarn, spandex, but there is some hypothesis that it could be because of some recycled material and so on, but still not proven. Phthalates are ubiquitous. We find them everywhere. And many of them, the surfactants break down into the estradiol. POPs, or persistent organic pollutants, were first addressed by the Stockholm Convention. At that time, it was the dirty dozen. These were pesticides that were used on the agricultural field. But today, the biggest name is PFAS. Every single company, country around the world is talking about this. If you see over here, the European Union is considering a ban. And on the right-hand side, you can see this goes into effect in the United States in 2023. That means this year, this will go into effect. In the US, if you go, there are very few water bodies left which are safe. This is the kind of notice that's put up. This is on the Huron River in the United States, and they say, please don't eat fish from here. So I think if majority of the water bodies are contaminated, today the fish will have to come only from cultivated farms, not from anywhere in nature. On the right-hand side, you can see the European Chemical Agency. The date is 25th of February, so it's only about 3 weeks ago, right? And so if you use perfluorocarboxylic acid, remember that this is the date. You cannot be placed on the market. Forever chemicals is what is the new name that's given. Like legacy chemicals, this is forever chemicals because they remain forever. PFAS is being ubiquitous, it's found everywhere. The Guardian took upon itself the entire year of 2022. First one was in Jan, it talked about high levels of toxic forever chemicals in anti-fogging sprays. The forever chemicals in May, the article was where 60% of children's waterproof and stain-resistant textiles were found to contain. 80% of US waterways are contaminated, an article in October. And this throughout the year, the Guardian focused on the problem of PFAS. Another issue is microfibers and microplastics. Now this has been in discussion because it's again ubiquitous, it's found in the snow, it's found in human lungs, it is found in human blood. Every single place they are finding these fibers. One interesting news that I came across literally 3 weeks ago is that it was all the time thought it was microplastics. But the new research that was published literally in February of 23, that's about a month ago, that majority of them are cellulosic in nature. They are not plastic. In fact, the polyester was minimal. There was some polypropylene that was observed, but majority was cellulosic. So now this has brought to a big question in the world. Is cotton degradable? Is cotton really degradable? Because these are all cellulosic in nature. Now the way we picked cotton from nature and if we release, perhaps it is degradable. But after we process it, after we cross-link it, after we treat it with reactive dyes and we have locked the hydroxy groups and so on, is it really biodegradable? I think a lot of new study will be done on this subject in the coming years. That's my guess, because in one forum they actually talked that whether it should be classified as synthetic. Chemical residues, shocking, but they are present every single place. 300 chemicals were detected in the fat tissue of a dead polar bear. Synthetic chemicals. 300 plus chemicals by Chemi, that's the same institute where Professor Achwal did his work. They launched that the human breast milk in the West contains this kind of chemicals. They found the same in the umbilical cord because they say that preferentially from the mother, the toxins go to the fetus. Shocking, the country this is the Thames River in London. You will be surprised to note that from Monday to Friday, you can get a spike in cocaine. Every single day of the week, you get a spike in cocaine. Every Friday night, you get party drugs. And every Monday night, you get antidepressants. Right? The thing is that our effluent treatment plants that are there, STP plants that are there, are unable to filter this. At one time, this river was actually a flowing sewer. And the parliament had to close the doors in the 20s and the 30s because the stench was unbearable. Today, this is the situation. And I think the same thing we had experienced when we had a program with the people, Clean Ganga campaign. And they said that they are finding it very difficult to remove steroids, remove antibiotics from the Ganga. So these are new challenges that we as a world we are going to face. The anthropogenic impact of humans is unimaginable. We thought that at least the Mariana Trench would be clean. So scientists from various British universities went right down 10,000 meters. That is, even if you put Mount Everest right to the bottom of this Mariana Trench, it would still be 2,000 feet below sea level. Even there, they have found polychlorinated biphenyls, a purely man-made product in large quantities in the ocean fauna. So it has spread. We need to think about ways. Enough of the problem. Now let's look at what mitigation initiatives were taken over these years. Man understood these problems already by 1950. Now if you see here, the first convention was started in 1950. The Rhine is the river which is in Germany, right? And one thing we must understand, that this was at one time the only river that was used to carry effluent, because 5 out of 6 world's largest companies manufacturing chemistry and chemicals were on this one river. So as for the benefit of students, this is in Europe. So in Switzerland you have the Alps. As the snow melts from the Alps, it comes to the first town of Basel. You had 2 large companies called Sando and Siba at that time. The names are different now, but these are the 2 places in Basel. As the river comes up to Frankfurt, you had from Frankfurt am Main, the Höchst was there. As it came up to Ludwigshafen, again on the river Rhine, you had BASF, which still exists. And as the river further came up to Cologne, you had Bayer. Now all these names are different, but the fact remains that they were all on one river so that you could discharge your effluent over there. By 1950, that river had almost no fish left and it was frothing. So the Rhine Convention was started and it took 49 years before it was completed. This was the beginning of the initiatives and efforts. So everything under the United Nations comes as a guideline, as a framework. It's not a legislation. Then we go on to Stockholm Convention, Marpol. Each one of these conventions, the list goes on till we come to Rio Declaration. That's the first time in Rio where the discussion was on a sustainable development. And then in 2002 was which made the biggest impact was the Johannesburg Summit. This is where they really came with guidelines which are very crystal clear. 2006 was the mother of all chemical legislations. That is when the REACH registration, or rather it stands for Registration, Evaluation, Authorization and Restriction of Chemicals. This law in Europe. Why Europe? Because they were the first to be impacted. They were the first to learn of the problems. That's why this law came up from there. And then we go on to the different conventions till we come to top 27, which was conducted last year, and it has brought about this new set of 17 goals. So it was initially 11 goals, then it went to 17 goals, and this was when the 17s were charted in 2016. Incidentally, I was lucky enough to be invited to this event, and I went as actually a representative of the German government, and I had the chance to speak for 15 minutes to express some of my thoughts on what could be the way forward. Today, GHG emissions and net zero, this is changing the industry completely worldwide. We have scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, different scopes where the emission is measured. We are ourselves today helping brands measure their scope across the world. For example, in one case, we are actually measuring the electrical consumption in each shop, in 1,600 shops, every month. Then they are calculating whether that electricity has come from coal, it's come from renewable resource, what's the mechanism for that electricity. And then there is a tool provided by Schneider which actually calculates the footprint. Because the whole world has gone and made commitments that we will reduce 10, 20, 30, 50 and 100%, we will achieve net zero by this. But what is the baseline? Almost nobody has the baseline. We have the longest time, I think it's to 2070 is when our commitment. Let's look at country legislation. So first was only a framework from the United Nations. Now we come to legislation. So REACH is monitored by ICA. This is the agency in Finland. And then we have the CPSIA and the Toxic Substances Control Act. These are two from the United States. Now in US it's peculiar. There are two types of laws. One is a federal law which applies to all 52 states. And the other is a law that applies to individual states. The strictest being the one is California Proposition 65. California Proposition 65 is so strict that if you have, any of you who have been to Los Angeles or in San Francisco, if you step into a restaurant, the first signboard in most restaurants will actually read, this restaurant is known to use substances that are carcinogenic in nature. Right? After that you want to come and eat food, you were pre-warned, you were pre-told. So Proposition 65 does not ban anything, but it says you have to tell the consumer upfront that this is informed choice, absolutely. That's a disclaimer that you like it, you come. Our prawns have some pesticides. This is the next one that is taking shape in a very big way. And I expect that this would be a game changer, the European Green Deal. And this was announced by President von der Leyen in her speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos just 2 months ago, in January 23, as an initiative of the EU. The idea is to sharpen the competitive edge, right, with clean tech investment. And that's the whole underlying philosophy. This is going to be a big game changer in my opinion. Extended producer responsibility, already in some industries, but will it come to textiles? Will you have to take your clothes back? What do you do with it? Already many companies are already advertising since last 5 years and 10 years, but nobody knows what really happens to those clothes. You know, it's only exchange. At the moment, what is happening is they're all going to Kenya. And there are mountains over there of these clothes. Best available technology. This existed about 10 years ago. which was updated up to technology at that point in time. The final draft 2022, which was released in March, perhaps very soon we will have the final best available technology. So this goes right from fiber to end of life. These were some of the initiatives when even Professor Achwal was involved in the early 90s, right? The first list on the left-hand side is which came up with brands where they came up on their own voluntarily and said, our product is clean, we will not use any of these substances. That was the first thing. The second was where industry came forward, either from the private or from even governments, and they came up with what was called as eco initiatives. You had the Global Organic Textile Standard, you had the Blue Sign, Standard 100, and of course the chemical industry came with responsible care. What is in the right-hand side box? These are new. When I say new, they are less than 15 years old, about 12 to 12 years old. The first one that you see, ZDHC, was born out of a reaction when Greenpeace went and attacked the factories in China. And they came up saying that, okay, we will clean up the supply chain by 1st January 2020. Sustainable Apparel Coalition has come up with what is called as a Higg Index, and this is giving you a rating for your facility, and they have got different modules. The Apparel Impact Institute is a largely innovation funding organization, and Textile Exchange, which was earlier called as Organic Exchange, comes from the fiber side. These four together now have formed what is called as the Apparel Alliance. This is maybe just the last couple of years, and this alliance, I think, will be the alliance to keep a track and keep an eye on what's happening, because this would be the future. This is what will drive the industry forward. The one below is the Microfiber Consortium. This is the apparel industry's initiative on controlling the microfibers. I have no idea how this would be really done, because it's going to be something which is impossible, in my opinion, to handle. I'll only take one of them for zero discharge of hazardous chemicals guidelines, because this is the one that has had the maximum impact. They focus on input, process, and output. And they've come up with several guidelines and guidebooks which today have become almost industry standards. One of them, the most important one, is the chemical gateway, where the chemicals which are entered into the chemical gateway, either at the foundational level, progressive level, or aspirational level, they are supposed to be clean chemicals. Media plays a role as well, a very big role. Killer Clothes. The first is a book by two doctors, Dr. Brian and Anna Clement. And the way they have described is so beautiful. They say that apart from chemicals, the design of the clothes also plays a role. For example, they have linked their research, they have linked with faulty designed undergarments with breast cancers. And they have given great details in over there of the importance of design. We have this movie, The True Cost. It actually talks about the dirty side of the fashion industry behind, but this was a movie that became very popular. Dark Waters talks about the contamination of PFOA in the United States from DuPont. And of course, Erin Brockovich, wonderful movie where Julia Roberts plays a fantastic role, and it talks about hexavalent chromium. While at hexavalent chromium, I would like to share because with this audience, because we found something new. This is from the dye stuff, where we analyzed a powder which was, let's say, 1 year ago, and there was no hexavalent chromium. But after 1 year, when we examined the same powder, again from the same bottle, we found development of hexavalent chromium. So it is something that we have to keep in our mind, that this is something that is also generated, just like it is generated in leather due to storage conditions where humidity and other pH and others play a role. Now, perhaps some research needs to be done under what conditions this happens. NGOs. NGOs are like watchdogs. Hundreds of them today. I will just say that a couple of them that are really making a big impact are Changing Markets Foundation and Greenpeace. These two are driving the industry to make the necessary change. Another one is Extinction Rebellion. This is making big waves in London. These are all photographs from literally 2 weeks ago. And you see the ugly truth about fashion. So the youngsters are coming up. They realize the problems and they want to make their voice heard. Young individual activists. All these are mitigation initiatives. We are still on that topic, just in case you lost track. These individuals are also making their voices heard. And how? Let's come to innovations. Now, with all these problems, the world is looking for innovations because they realize that many of these are things that will need to be addressed. The first thing for innovation you need is funds. You need money. You need ideas and you need money. Just for the benefit of all the students over here, money is there for the asking. If you have an idea, I don't think money will be a problem at all. You will just need to search and you will find it. Each one of these has probably funded over 100 innovations. Each one of these. So we need to keep our eyes and ears open and we need to really approach with the right ideas in our mind. Where will you see innovation? I think 5 areas where the world is looking at innovation. First is new material. One of the big brands from Portland, Oregon, employs today 150 scientists only to look at new materials. Only to look at new materials. And new materials are coming from all kinds of resources. The second is design. The third is technology, process, and new colorants. Then we need circularity and traceability. And finally, end of life. I could have had at least 500 examples under this section. I've just taken one each just to give an example and just to explain what the process is. New fibers. All kinds of fibers are being explored once again from raw materials. In fact, we have somebody in the audience right now whose daughter is looking at fungus and mycelium to produce a leather which is biodegradable. So all these new areas are being explored. Design ideas. Now, design is going to, in my opinion, play the biggest role. In this case, this entire fabric can be broken into pieces just by heat dissolving stitching threads. Now, this is the idea of design, because the first biggest challenge is how do you separate, and then how do you recycle. Before I go to this example, I remember a conference in Germany almost 20 years ago, where I was in the audience as a delegate, and one German professor was there, and I got up and asked him one question. I said that if I look at a sports shoe today, let's say Adidas, Nike, Reebok, whichever shoe, you have a minimum of 70 components and sometimes in excess of 100 components. How can you ever recycle such a product? So I said, according to me, even the first made shoe is still in some landfill today, as it is. It cannot be recycled. He gave it a thought and he said, yes, I agree. He says, I said, what could be the way forward? So he says, I think perhaps all components will have to be made from a similar chemistry. That was his idea. That was his answer 20 years ago. This company has come up with, Napapiri, has come up with a product which is entirely made from one component, which is nylon, and nylon 6, and then you can recycle it 100%. So they had to do a lot to have nylon zippers, nylon sliders, everything made from one material. But this is the kind of ideas, these are the kind of ideas that will be important tomorrow. Design, material, new technologies. This is not new, it has been under discussion for some 10 years now. Supercritical carbon dioxide. But what is important and what is interesting, I found, is that all these big names are now actually producing with this technology. So you have got Adidas, Bonprix. Bonprix is a very big German company based in Hamburg in the north, part of the Otto Group. Brooks Brothers, Gap, Decathlon, Zara, the Spanish company. They are actually making use of this technology. That is what is interesting. We have colorants, new colorants, dye recycle. They have making colors from waste fibers. Now, this is new. Now, whether it will be scalable, whether it will have any impact of any significance, only time will tell. Similarly, in the last years, Archroma has come with earth colors, which were made from shells and this kind of raw materials. And very recently, they announced colors from fabric waste. On the right-hand side, you have Colorifix, which is a company in England. They are making colors out of microbes. And very interesting, I had the chance of visiting this just 4 months ago. And the concept is that they will actually set up a plant manufacturing these microbes next to a dyeing factory. So what will come from there is only a vial which may be 10 ml. That's all. And the rest of it is produced right where it will be needed. Again, very early days, very early days, limited range of colors, limited ideas, but then everything starts as a thought and a concept. I mean, let's face it that in my time only James Bond had this, correct? In my student days, I think nobody else had something like this. Only he could find out something. You know, I can today find out about everything that somebody has done with just one Google and one LinkedIn connection. Algae-based pigments. This is something new again that's being studied and being used commercially. Microbial pigments. This is from our own students from our college who have set this up. It's a matter of great pride, and then are also being recognized globally today. This is a new technology. This is new machine that has been put in Hong Kong, developed by HKRITA, is a research organization. It's an innovation organization started in 2006 by Hong Kong Polytechnic. And the interesting thing is that it is supposed to make from one garment to another garment again, completely cyclical. Okay, it's a prototype today, but perhaps it would have some potential going ahead. Another Australian startup called Blocktex has again begun. They claim that their technology is able to separate cotton and polyester fiber blends so that they can be fully recycled once again. Traceability. This is going to be a huge impact. What do I mean by traceability? Until just 5 years ago, if you had the world's biggest brand, they only knew their tier 1 supplier. They knew where their garment was made, who was the cut and sew company. They had no idea beyond that. So they didn't know which was the dye house. They didn't know which dyes and chemicals were used. 5, 6 years ago, that's it. Now the world wants to know. They need to have traceability. They need to have. So a lot of apps are coming up. A lot of technologies are coming up. There are traceability fibers being added. Innovation again in this area will be phenomenal in my opinion. So tomorrow's shirt, when you go, you just use your smartphone, and if you look at a QR code over there, you should be able to say that this cotton came from Uzbekistan, the spinning was done in Coimbatore, weaving was done here, processing was done here, these were the type of chemicals used. And finally, it could be tracked right through the supply chain till end of life, till it goes to the end. So the supply chain is very complex. It starts from input raw materials, it goes through fiber manufacture, processing, it goes through garment assembly, retailers, and finally the consumers. So this would need a complete traceability across the entire supply chain. The new focus on end of life. While I mentioned that there's very little work being done on end of life, when I actually started to study, I found that some research has already been initiated. The first one is that soil biodegradation of cotton fabrics with common finishes. This is from 2021. Down below you can see detection of reactive dyes from dyed fabrics after soil degradation using this technique, analytical technique of mass spectrometry. Again from 2020, degradation studies of CI reactive blue 19 on biodegraded cellulosic fabrics. Biodegradation I'm only seeing in the last 2 or 3 years. Down below is environmental impact of discarded apparel, landfilling and recycling. This was the concern that I had for almost last 10 years, but this is now being addressed, and this is from very reputed journals from Elsevier over here. Another one here talks about the review of clothing microbiology, the history of clothing and role of microbes. So this, I will see a lot of new research. So if you are looking for new research ideas, I think end of life and what happens at end of life is going to be very critical and very important. I thought that when I realized that very little was known in textiles, I thought that in pharmaceuticals it may be much better. So I checked with many pharma people that, do you know what happens to after I consume an antibiotic or I consume a drug, it passes through my body, it does its job, it's got out of my system, but what happens after that? And the shocking answer is that no, we don't know. In what way does it break down? In what way? In fact, that's what was corroborated by the work at the Ganges, that the antibiotics have just gone through. And how these will impact in the longer run in the bio chain, in the food chain and all these, I think we will learn in the coming. So each of these challenges is an idea for a solution, an idea for innovation. Last, I want to now ask, I want you to all see the next slide. How many of you had the chance to hear this video? Right? So I think only 10 hands. So I will then continue. I had goosebumps on me when I heard this video. Absolutely fascinating. Just I picked up 10 highlights from there. The first one, this gentleman, Deepak Bagla, is the MD and CEO of the National Investment and Promotion Agency, which was established by the Government of India in 2015. So this agency is only 8 years old today. The team of 400 are from IITs, from IIMs, and from Ivy Leagues. What is really, really stimulating and motivating to see the youngsters is that they have taken a pay cut from 7% to 90% to address this fantastic cause. And the United Nations has rated this agency as #1. He goes on to say that we are seeing an unprecedented transformation of this country today. In 1750, the world GDP, India was 25%. That's where we were. Today, we are getting FDIs have crossed 950 billion. 532 billion in the last 19 months from 162 countries and in 60 sectors. This is absolutely fantastic. India's economy today is 3.2 trillion. The first trillion took 67 years to make. The second trillion just 8. And the third trillion just 5 years. You can do the math, where we are headed. 2/3 of GDP is domestic demand. We are today perhaps, at least we weren't last week, but this week may have crossed China. Right? Because we are 1.4 billion. We are the world's most populous country. And 1 billion are less than 35 years of age. All of you in the room here are part of that 1 billion. We will remain the youngest nation till 2070. This is an aspirational India. This is your India. This is the India you are going to encounter and you are going to make today. I want to leave you with one line which I think, I see the world changing so exponentially that I think today will look archaic in a decade. What we are doing today will look really historic, prehistoric. I want to leave you with something. I hope this plays here.
Yeah, I do have some final words. I want to make a prediction for you. I predict that the 21st century is going to be the Indian century. The dynamism, the energy. Everywhere I go here, I meet people who are interested in self-improvement and growth. This country has something special, and it's a democracy. This is going to be the Indian century. And I'll make one more prediction for you. In this 21st century, the most important alliance is going to be the alliance between India and the United States.
So thank you very much for a patient listening. Thank you.
We will now have questions.
I'm inspired by him, so I can ask you one question, Mr. Nimkar, is we heard about the whole hazardous chemistry which is coming from 200 years of development and everything, 8,000 chemicals, and we now know probably 500, 600 are really bad, and we are trying to remove it. But what is the end? What is the end game of it, How many we will discover? What kind of innovations will bring it to be sustainable?
I don't have an answer, but I have a theory behind this. So I had the chance of doing one study for a dye called indigo which originally came from nature, and then we manufactured it synthetically. I studied the degradation pattern of both these, and to my surprise, both of them degraded in an identical manner. I have degraded many other reactive dyes and all other dyes which barely degrade. So a thought came to my mind, and this was a lecture that I actually had to present, and I presented this in England. I said that why don't we look at other molecules from nature? For example, we have all the shades, but being in nature, being from nature, they are fugitive, so they are designed to break down. Can we think of some new mechanism by which it can be locked, right? And then it can be reopened at the end of life. So I remember giving this talk in England, and as I stepped down, I had my professor sitting over there. He came up to me. It was tea time. He put his hand around me and he says, "Ullas, what is this nonsense you just spoke?" So that was his opening remark at that time. What is this nonsense you just spoke? And then he came back to me at about 4 o'clock at tea time in the afternoon, and he says, this Professor McKelvey, he says that, no, this is troubling me. I think it may be worth a try. I said, I told you it was just a thought. But everything begins. I mean, we will now have to start thinking of ways which would survive the next 100 years. What we are doing today is greenwashing. We are doing something which will push today's problem to tomorrow. Share your clothes, recycle them, give it to your cousin. I mean, this is not something that is going to survive 100 years or 1,000 years. We will now we have reached a point wherein we have to really think. Perhaps, I don't know what would be the answers, but enough brains in this classroom, that would really...
Yeah, thank you. And
we'll find some solutions.
And if I'm not limited to only one question, I would like to ask one last one. So I think for the benefit
I'll answer
of all.
till I'm thrown out.
Yeah. No, it puts me, when I was in UDCT, I was in textiles, but we used to go and attend the dye stuff lecture, and Professor Shashadri, I think he was there, if I recall correctly. And whenever we talked about aniline and all, and he said that in Europe, this is getting banned, And the question was, why was it not being done here? And he always used to say, our lives are cheaper. So when I put the Rhine, initiative and all started many years back, and considering that, we are getting a lot of money and we are prospering, and when we are prospering, we are also using a lot of chemicals in this country. And that means at that fast rate, we must be also polluting, as I presume, So how fast our government or all the necessary people, responsible should take an initiative that we will keep it with it. How far behind we would be, in these initiatives?
I think what has happened is that we are not behind the world. We are at par with the world because we are where the goods are being produced. So we are complying with what they are demanding. Now, whether we would go one step forward from here and come with new innovations, that is there. But we are nowhere behind the rest of the world. In fact, I see more knowledge in this country over here on the subject. We are quite advanced. And of course, there will always be newer challenges that will keep coming in the years. Yeah. But I don't think we are anywhere behind. And in fact, I think we will be showing the pointers to the world. They will be showing the next pointers to the world, and that this is how you should do.
Thank you, Mr. Nemkar.
Facilitate that, sir. Actually, in most of the cases, we all end up talking, and one of the demand which comes is that brands are not, at the end of the day, they may talk all this, but they at least, at the end of the day, they go by the costs. So we can't improve the processes till we have funds to improve those processes. What you said that all the big guys are using, that supercritical, etc., in India today, the situation is, last 1 year, we have been trying, and one of the biggest groups says they would like to look up to NTTM to support it rather than re-engineer themselves. Now, that is because the brands may have lot of demand, but nobody is willing to foot the bill. So when we talk of funding sources that need to be combined with the demand cycle, and that should get factored. When somebody's process is better, or he has to invest in that, that fund has to come. And that cannot be only a government fund, sir. I mean to say, you have said it today, but I need to see how much of it is actually flowing down to the enterprises in India, which is largely MSMEs.
Correct. Absolutely correct. So I think as a comment on that is that we are running out of time. The world is running out of time. At the moment, there is more effort on how to look green, right? Not how to be green, right? This is the real truth. This is, like we say.
Unfortunately, sir, most of them are becoming more, I feel, sir, that when we talk of Renewcell or anybody else, these are a lot of funds. Where are we getting them in terms of finally implementing those on the ground? And that is where I need everybody here in this house to see that we are able to channelize those funds to final outputs, which is not happening, sir. My certifications requirement are too costly for my manufacturers. So they end up going shortcuts.
So shouldn't we come with Indian certifications? I
agree with you, but then that is where I need the brand appetite for it.
No, let me complete. We came up with something called as the Matka in 1994. If you look up your records,
yes,
you will find, right? Not even once it was promoted. Not even a single brand took it up, even in India. So if we come up with something like this, if we want to have our own certification, then you can have a reciprocal arrangement that yes, this is our certification. We are actually waiting last 5 years for the CMSR guidelines, which is the equivalent of India REACH, right? It's been in the draft for 5 years. We were signatory to the United Nations where 31st December 2020 was the last date. Then came the pandemic. So everything got delayed. But why is it now not implemented? For example, do you realize we are the only country, we are one of the few countries that does not have a chemical inventory.
Yes.
We don't know what we have on this land. So after REACH came up, we have got Taiwan, we have got Korea, we have got everything, we have got Turkey, we have got even smaller countries who came up with their chemical inventory. We still have it as a draft. So, many of these initiatives we need to really push them, because the production is here. The chemical industry here, the next 20 years is going to be a gold mine. Sure. There is nobody else in the world who can make. And as we heard yesterday, China +1, which is the +1? We are the +1.
I would like to make a suggestion to Madam Commissioner. Allow me. Ma'am? Yeah? I'm Mahendra Tanna. I'm also visiting. Thank you. The suggestion is there that you talked about funds, availability and everything, but the statistic says that 60-70% of the innovations, groundbreaking innovations, go into the dustbin at an early stage because they cannot be perceived well or understood well or not financed in time. I always take an example of a football team in USA, and they have their called as a talent finder. They have a talent finder. Rather than the innovators coming to look for funds and searching for is the ministry or the whoever. I mean, I don't know. They should put a talent finder in the industry. Find out who can make a difference. Just like in football, they do it. They send it to every country to find out who is the talent of football. And they find out.
Your point. My point was very simple, sir. We had one slide here talking about use of supercritical carbon dioxide, apparently being done for 2 decades by other brands. Apparently we have done ourselves our own research. Apparently we have people who have fabricated. Apparently we have tried from our side to get the funding tied up also. But why is it that industry here is not taking it up? When we talk to them, they say there is an additional cost to it. And that additional cost, as on date, they don't feel forced. No brand is imposing upon them or willing to take the bill. Now, that's also a reality there. So it cannot be only one way from government. It's an ecosystem. We can try to get, when sir said about the funds part, I would really look up to him, and I will involve him in our enterprises also, in whatever efforts we are doing, is how to get this gap to be breached. Now, there is something on the funding part. From the brands, we came to know that bigger guys who are sourcing and who are complying to ESG guidelines, they get their bankers to give cheap post-shipment credit. Now, this is only known to very few people in the sector. We tried to broad base this knowledge. But that knowledge is not there. We are not sharing. As an industry, I would say, unfortunately, despite being such a large industry, we are not sharing it down the value chain. And when we are not sharing it or we are not letting it happen, you know, it's basically, finally they say, madam, every time the brand comes and they only end up giving the order to XYZ only on the final difference of the cost, which could be 1, 2, 3, 5 rupees. Now that's ridiculous. We have whole earth at stake. We have our lives at stake. We have our next generations at stake, and we are counting pennies at 5 rupees, 10 rupees, 25 rupees. Now, that is where I'm just saying one example I just remembered because I saw that slide, and that's where when I'm happy that he has brought in that funds it for asking, and we have all these guys to give us solutions. Today, our brain power is the best, and I'm sure that 2047, 20% of the world would be run by Indian brain power. That's the studies which has come, and in another 8 years, we are looking at 8 trillion economy. So I go with him. I'm very happy that he has brought it out. I would look up to all our students here, and I would look up, I hope we have part of industry also here, because I would like the industry to be part of such discussions also. Because if industry is not here, and that kind of lookout, unfortunately, I'm telling you, I raised it even in all the fora. One of the biggest guys says, oh, process change requires a lot of time, so we will like to take it through NTTM. Now, sorry, I mean, that beats me. That beats me to understand that should only NTTM be there. If Professor Nimkar is telling us all these funding opportunities, we can tie all of them together. Everything requires funds. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. It was quite an enriching discussion for all of us. I now invite Professor A.B. Pandit and Dr. Deepti Devbakar, Mr. Abhijit Achwal and Professor R.B. Adivarekar to hand over the memento as a token of appreciation to Speaker Shri Ullas Nimkar. Sir, please. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I would request Professor R.R. Deshmukh, the Registrar ICT Mumbai, to please deliver vote of thanks.
Dignitaries present here in the auditorium, industrialists, industry experts, my colleagues, dear students, present here for late Professor W.B. Achwal Endowment Oration 2023. First, I sincerely thank his children, Mr. Abhijit Achwal, Dr. Deepti Devbakar, and other family members for their support and active participation in this program. The program would not have been initiated without their sincere cooperation, even these hard times. Then I take this opportunity to thank Mr. Ullas Nimkar, Chairman, Nimtech Technical Services Private Limited. He has been the speaker of today's lecture on clothing 8 billion challenges to people, planet and profits. Sir, you have clearly explained the hazards posed by different chemicals applied in wet processing. He also dwelt on the challenges posed by some of these chemicals which are not degrading, ubiquitous and get accumulated in the ecosystem and their possible solutions. Thank you, sir, for your wonderful talk. A special mention has to be made of Dr. Vijay Habbu for initiating, coordinating and helping us getting eminent speakers like Ullas Nimkar for this event year after year. It was really pleasing to see Textile Commissioner Madam Roop Rashi, who made it convenient to attend this function in spite of your busy schedule. Thank you, madam. I would also sincerely thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor A.B. Pandit, for all the guidance that he has given for conducting this program successfully. I also thank Professor R.D. Kale, Head Department of Fibers and Textile Processing Technology, for his enthusiasm, tireless efforts to make this event happen. It is also worthwhile to thank here Professor R.V. Adivrekar, Professor Ashok Atle for continuous support in organizing this event. Last but not the least, as Professor Atle had mentioned in the beginning of the program, that I sincerely thank all the audience for their positive and enthusiastic presence throughout the program. Without your presence, no program can be successful. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I request you all to rise for national song. We'll be having national song Vande Matram, and then we'll be heading for high tea outside.
Vande Mataram, Vande Mataram, Sujalam Sufala, Malayaj Shitala, Sasya Shyamala Mataram, Vande Mataram, Shubhra Jyotsna Pulakitaya Sumita Drumadala Shobhini Suhasini Sumadhura Bhashini Sukhadam Varadam Mataram Vande Mataram Vande Mataram.
I request the dignitaries and the family members of Professor W.B. Achwal to please get in the center for a group picture.